Hey y'all, it is I, Anthony the Canadian Guy, and welcome to WrestleSode. Today we have a special episode upload. As you can tell, this is the second upload for this week as opposed to the one a week that we usually do because we did not record a live one this week and we wanted to make sure that you guys were enjoying WrestleSode nonetheless. So we are bringing you our interview today with one T.Y. Jackson, wrestling out of Edmonton. We learned about his story, how he grew up watching wrestling with his mom, for instance, how he got into independent wrestling, how he wrestled people like Fandango or Dango or Johnny Curtis or however you want to say his name, with his matches like that, where like he had one of the most fun Q&A sections. This was one of the longer interviews. It was a really great time and I had a really great chat there with T.Y. Jackson. And just so you guys know, we will be back once again putting up another upload next Tuesday, so remember to stick around for that until we are back with our live recordings, which will be back as soon as I don't work the evening shift anymore. If there is anybody that you would love to see me interview, put their name down below in the comments section. And don't forget, if you are enjoying these WrestleSodes, remember to give it a nice thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and tell all of your friends, turn on the bell, and all the good jazz that you get to do. But without any further ado, let's get into our interview today with one T.Y. Jackson. Hey! All right.
Hey.
Yo, buddy, how are you doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. So first up, thank you so much for joining me. I was just saying to everybody that we had this conversation last year when I went up to the MPW show in Edmonton. I was like, we got to get you on WrestleSode when I'm back. I'm so glad it actually happened now that we're back. So that's amazing. Thank you. And also thank you for being the first guest that's here when I actually have a haircut and I feel like the most professional person now compared to the other ones in the past. So that's really great. How are you doing today? Tell me, how are you?
I'm doing well. Speaking of haircuts, I don't think I've had one in the past year and a half. So I think you're beating me there when it comes to professionalism, eh?
That maybe, but you actually look good compared to me with I don't look great when my hair is all in every direction. It just doesn't work for me. So first up, I wanted to say thanks for being here. Now, I have a bunch of stuff that I wanted to chat with you about, but first up, I actually really want to start all the way back at the beginning because you and me have never really had a conversation in the past, like an actual kind of friendly conversation. So I don't really know the answers to these basic questions, but how did you get started in wrestling? Where did it all start with T.Y. Jackson? Because I only kind of just found out about you. You're oh, this amazing Edmonton wrestler, and I got to see you live once, and it's about as much as I get sometimes. So I'm I need to know more.
Fair enough. So I guess going back to the beginning, wrestling was kind of always in my household growing up. My mom was a huge fan of wrestling, so she always had it on TV, and I would just always be there watching. So that's kind of how we bonded, me growing up. And she'd always let me stay up later on Mondays because Raw was airing a little later at the time, so I was able to stay up and watch with her. And so it was just always something that was there and something that I loved. Just like how some people grow up watching hockey or basketball, wrestling was kind of the thing that was in my house. So I don't kind of have a definitive kind of moment where I got into it. It was just always there for me. So I was always a fan.
Do you remember a moment where it kind of clicked for you, where you're oh, hey, I have to make sure I'm home on Mondays to watch wrestling, or you're this is now officially a part of my life, not just something that my mom watches, like how it was with me and Golden Girls, because that's what it was like for me. I had to watch Golden Girls eventually.
Fair enough. I think for me, it was probably around maybe 2011-ish, maybe, is when it really became okay, now it's not just a household kind of hobby. I became a huge fan. It was around that the punk era when he was kind of having his rise, and that's when I really started to click with it. So it's around that time.
So would you say that punk has kind of been an inspiration for you in terms of maybe favorite wrestler or somebody that you like to model yourself towards, or did that go to somebody else, or is that just the timing?
I think it's just probably the timing, but to be fair, I was a huge punk fan. I was always a fan of the wrestlers that were not the most, I guess, stereotypical wrestlers. So I was a huge punk fan. I was a huge Hardy fan, because they were just different, and they didn't look like the stereotypical guy you'd see in the ring, and they kind of had an edge to them that was very intriguing, and it kind of wasn't widely seen at the time. So yeah, I would say probably those guys were kind of huge inspirations for me to kind of get into wrestling.
So you didn't really grow up in the golden era of wrestling then, with the Hulk Hogan's and then going straight into the Attitude Era, or even really the PG era is kind of what you would say more of where you started, because You didn't even really have the ruthless aggression at that point. So
Yeah. I kind of caught like the very end of the Ruthless Aggression era, but like I think it's probably the PG era was the one that I remember watching a lot, which is funny because every time I bring that up to people, they're like, "Well, how did you become like such a huge fan if you were watching during the PG era?"
I mean, there's something
Um,
for everybody during every era, I would say, right?
yeah.
Have you gone
But
back and watched a lot of the older stuff, or?
I have, yeah. I mean, not everything, but I have gone back, and I think it's just natural. The more you watch, the more you kind of search for things, and then things start to pop up, and you naturally get to watch. I'm gonna actually attribute to a lot of the knowledge I know from the Attitude Era is probably to WWE 13, the video game, because I know they had like a mode that was like Attitude Era,
Okay, yeah.
where you kind of like followed and did the exact same like stories, I guess, that happened in the Attitude Era. So I remember playing that, and that's where I got like a lot of the background knowledge. So then I went back and kind of started watching it more, and yeah, so I did end up going back and watching.
Was there any old school wrestlers that you got really drawn to, where you were like, "Oh, I understand why people appreciated these guys now, even though it was before my time"?
That's a good question. This is maybe I would say DX, but I think it's kind of cheating because I remember watching DX as a kid still. But going back and watching their older stuff, it's super entertaining. And that's what I kind of noticed about the Attitude Era was a lot of the wrestling stuff was a lot of really entertaining, like Stone Cold, The Rock, um, all those guys. So yeah, I think probably like Stone Cold, The Rock, and DX were kind of like guys I still go back and watch now to this day. So
Absolutely. So, are you still absorbing weekly wrestling of any sorts, or like, are you still following some of the bigger promotions, or are you mostly just dived into the indie stuff right now?
I do. I think nowadays, I mean, to be fair, it's kind of hard to follow a lot of the product because there's just so much.
Right.
And I feel like once you're into it as well and you're a wrestler, it's kind of sometimes hard to watch wrestling. Not that you don't enjoy it anymore, not that you don't have the love for it, but it's just, I guess, once you do it, you kind of see stuff differently. But I still like follow. I mean, I follow through all my social media, so it's hard to avoid it. But I do occasionally watch AEW and WWE, and but I really get into like indie stuff now, like watching stuff like GCW or like watching stuff in the UK is becoming very intriguing to me. So I don't mind watching indie stuff as well too.
Is there a style of wrestling that you really like to watch or something? Because I know like UK, for instance, is a lot usually more technical, a little bit more
Hmm.
realistic in terms of the hitting versus. So, for instance, is that something that you're drawn more towards, or is there a style of wrestling?
I think ever since I started getting into wrestling, I think the grappling and the hard hitting styles become more appealing to me. Before I got into wrestling, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I was a huge fan of like the flashy wrestling. Not that I'm not to this day, and not that I still don't try to put some of those flashy moves in my moveset. But I think once I got into it and I really started learning about wrestling and appreciating it, that's when I started going more into to the technical stuff, and I'm enjoying that stuff much more than I did when I was just a fan at the time. So
So you
yeah.
must really like watching people like Zack Sabre Jr. and like Brian Danielson these days, who are just like these master class technical, just gods in the ring, essentially.
Yeah. It's much more enjoyable now looking at it from this lens. It's crazy what they do, and it's stuff that I'm trying to learn as well. But it takes a lot of years of experience to learn that stuff. So it's definitely enjoyable to watch.
Well, talking about learning it, so what made you go from the switch from like, hey, I really like wrestling, and now I'm watching it Monday nights. Now it's part of my weekly routine. Hey, I'm going to be a wrestler now. So like, what was that transition like?
Um, it was processed. To be fair, I guess I always had I guess a desire to do it. I always wanted to do it. But I think what really pulled the trigger for me was I think it was 2016, and I think it was SummerSlam, uh, and I watched that match between Styles and Cena, and
Yes.
I remember watching that match, and I already had a feeling that I wanted to be a wrestler, but as soon as I finished watching that match, I was like, I'm gonna do it, whether it's now, whether it's later in life, I'm gonna do it. So that was kind of the definitive point, but I didn't think I was gonna start training a year after that. So, but yeah.
That seems to be a very influential SummerSlam for the two of us because that's like that Finn Balor setup between him and Seth Rollins going into that SummerSlam as the Demon and all that, and him coming in
Mhm.
from NXT was like such a huge inspiration for me to get back into wrestling because I was just so drawn to the Demon. So it's awesome that SummerSlam 2016 was such a big inspiration to you. So how did that work though? Like, did you go to indie shows around like Alberta? Were you tied into the local scene at the time, or was it something you had to learn about?
Not really. I went to a couple indie shows when I was a kid. I remember my dad took me to one PWA show when I was a kid, only because I guess I was just so obsessed with wrestling, and WWE wasn't coming all the time to Edmonton at that point. So I guess he found some like local promotion, and it was PWA. So I did go to that show. I was a kid though, so I don't remember a lot of it. But yeah, I was kind of not as familiar with the scene. So I actually didn't watch or actually go to any indie shows once I started training. Like, and all the indie experience I had was from like once I started training.
So how did you find the training school that you wanted to go to if you weren't really watching the indie scene? Were you just like, hey, Google? Like
It's mostly it was Google. Yeah, I just Googled it one day. I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm just gonna Google it and see what comes up. And I remember vividly, like I remember finishing high school that year, and I was like, I was going into university the next semester, and I was like, okay, like I have a couple months, or I have 3-4 months, whatever it is. I'm gonna like go get some like light training, kind of scratch that itch for wrestling, and then once I'm kind of done school, I'll come back and do it full time. So I actually wasn't planning on doing wrestling full time once I started getting into it. So I just Googled wrestling promotions, and MPW came up. So got in contact with Massive Damage, and then he kind of let me know, hey, we have like a mini camp coming up. This is kind of like a 2-day session. You kind of you get in the ring, kind of learn the ropes, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. So I was like, that's perfect. I can come do that 2 days, kind of scratch that itch, and then come back later on. And then those 2 days turned into 2 months, and then 2 years, and now we're 5 years in. So I guess.
So I was gonna say, you never scratched that itch. If anything, it just got more and more intense. So you get there, you're there for your first like 2-day mini camp, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna give it all for these 2 days. And I've been told time and time again by every single person I've had on here, those days suck. Like, they aren't good days. Like, you're in pain. Like, you don't even like yourself by the end of the day. How did that you want to keep going after that? If you're like, I'm only doing this for 2 days, and then after again, I'm just gonna say, like an ass whooping of 2 days, I'm assuming you're like, yeah, let's do this forever now. Let's go.
Yeah, right. It's crazy. Like, I remember those 2 days were the most painful days, and I still have photos on my phone of after the second day, they kind of do like this chop. You've probably seen it, like other promotions do, but like they just like chop the living shit out of you.
Oh yeah.
And the entire roster does it. And I remember coming home and looking in the mirror, and I was like, wow, I love this. Like, that was like literally my reaction to it. So I guess I didn't expect any less. But the fact that I wasn't dead, I guess, was a good sign.
It takes a special type of person to be really, really interested in that, like coming home and being like, hey, I'm completely damaged. This is for me. I love this.
Yeah, it was like a badge of honor almost, you know? It's like, hey, I made it through, you know? Nobody can ever take this away from me, so.
That's so awesome. I really love that. So with regards to that, so now you've got 2 days in, you finished your mini camp, so you're like, hey, Massive, I want to keep doing this. Did you go into a full-time training at that point, or how long was it before you were like, hey, I got my first match this like Saturday or something? Like, how did that go about?
So
I know MPW sometimes it can go kind of fast, which is why I'm curious.
Yeah, that's what I was about to tell you. So it's actually quite funny. So my technically the first time I was in the ring in front of a crowd, I still wasn't actually like 100% committed in training.
Okay.
It was one of those things where like every time it kept dragging on, I just gave myself an excuse. So I was like, okay, I'll just do this one show. It's just a battle royal, and then I'm done. You know. But I did end up doing the Ripper Royal that year. And I started trade. So my mini camp was mid-October. And the Ripper Royal was beginning of November. So literally 2 weeks of training. So I remember coming in one day during the training sessions. They're like, yeah, we're just gonna teach you how to like go out of the ring and protect yourself. And I didn't think anything of it. And then I was told I was in this Ripper Royal, which was probably one of those painful matches I've ever been in, especially when you're a rookie and you're in the match. Some of those guys can be absolutely brutal. So
they're gonna take advantage of the new guy. They're gonna be like, he's green. Let's get him.
Yeah, they did. So but yeah, so that was kind of like my first time in the ring in front of a crowd, but my first actual match was in December. So it was beginning of December. And that's when I actually had my first match.
So was it like an addictive feeling? So I've also heard this from everybody, like that first time you walk out of those curtains and you're in front of that audience for the first time and you're like completely exposed because you're like, hey, they've never seen me before. I have to give them something, right? But that feeling is such an addictive feeling. I've walked out in front of crowds before. I know what that feels like. Was that like a super draw to you? Like, was that something that you were just like, oh, I'm hooked on that feeling now?
Yeah, it's a weird feeling. And like, you can only kind of relate to people who've done it and can actually experience it as well and kind of and know how it feels. And it's just it's surreal. And I don't think it was the feeling of the crowd that really got me. I think I was just so hooked at wrestling, and I was just such a fan of the craft that I was actually just enjoying my time at training at the time. Like I wasn't even like thinking about shows. And once I kind of got to the shows, it was almost like a cherry on top for those first couple of months. But I was just so immersed in the whole deal, and I was so like just having such a time of my life that I didn't even the crowd didn't even phase me at the time. But later on, once I started, becoming a little bit better at it and starting to be on shows more frequently and stuff, that's when that part about being in front of the crowd really got me, and it still does to this day. I still get nerves to this day, and I don't think you ever lose that. But yeah.
I was going to say you're such a natural in front of the crowd because at the MPW show I went to, you were totally working the crowd and you were doing really amazing stuff. So that's why I was like, this guy's kind of just a natural with that stuff. So it's just funny to hear. You're just like, no, I took time. I had to work myself up to that to really care. Are you one of those guys that when you're really into the match, you just kind of forget that there's a crowd and it's just the two of you and you guys are just putting it on kind of a thing?
It really depends. Sometimes I'm in matches where I don't even know that the crowd is there. Whether it's me immersed in like the moves or what I'm going to do next and stuff. But there's times where I literally like just can't stop hearing the crowd, and I always have the most fun when I'm listening to the crowd, and a lot of people can kind of tell when I am, because my expression kind of changes, my demeanor kind of changes. I'm much more like cool and more confident, because then I can play off to the crowd and I can react, and that's something that I really started learning once I got more into it. But I was like, just me as a person, I was never a person who was like afraid of like speaking in public, or I was never afraid of like being in front of crowds. So that's why it never fazed me. But it's just kind of a different feeling when you're being cheered or when you're being booed, and when everything you're doing kind of is for a reaction. It's just a different feeling than just like, going up and speaking on the microphone or something. So yeah, to answer your question in a long way, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, you said you had taken your first match. It was in December after you had started training, so like 2 months or whatever like that. What was your first match like? Who was it against? What was that experience like? Because you didn't have like the battle royal to fall back on. You didn't have other people. It was you and another guy. So how was that like?
Yeah, so it was actually a triple threat tag team
Okay.
match. So I was tagging with this gentleman named Big Ben at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So him and I were a team. And then the other team are friends of the show, now known as the Dad Bod Squad, but back then they were known as the Catalysts, or they were part of the Cat's Meow. So it was James Crowder, PJC, and Rick Jules. So they were the other team. And then the third team was Sydney Steele and Tyler James. So it was a triple threat tag match.
Yeah, North and
And
South in there. That's amazing.
yeah, and it was quite nerve wracking. But to be 100% like honest, PJC and Rick Jules really did a lot that match to really help us and carry us, because me and Ben were quite new at the time, and they were really cool, kind of helping us throughout that match and just giving us some advice and stuff. So it was kind of nerve wracking, but we were able to kind of build a rapport with those guys, and we were kind of able to have some fun in there, and we ended up having a lot of fun matches with those two throughout the rest of my time teaming with Ben. So
That's awesome. When you get in the ring these days, do you have somebody that you're just like, it's so comfortable, you've been in the ring with them so many times where you don't even have to think and you can put on a really great match with them? Like, do you have those, I guess you would call like sparring partners that are just naturals for you?
yeah, I mean, a lot of the guys that I kind of started with at Monster Pro are like that. So I just named it like Rick Jules and PJC. But like being in the ring with Mitch Clark, Rich King, Lumberjack Larry, Duke Dawkins, like those are guys that I started with so early, and we kind of bonded, and we kind of just got in the ring together and trained together all the time, that it's just natural, and that there's never a worry when I'm in the ring with them. So yeah, I'd say probably those guys, but like a lot of the guys that I started with at Monster Pro are like that too. So
Cool. So I have another question for you. So you're obviously wrestling, and you're still wrestling. You're 5 years into this, but you also said that you were going to go back to university, or you were going to do your university. Did you finish your schooling, and what did you take? Because people are always interested about the person behind the character, right?
So I actually continued on doing school while I was in wrestling, which was hard. I kind of had to like space out my time, so I wasn't able to like finish my degree right away, because I wanted to take just a lower course load, because it's hard to kind of balance everything at once. So but yeah, I'm still in school at the moment. I'm doing a Bachelor of Arts in Economics, so that's kind of my side hustle, as they would say, if wrestling is my main hustle, or vice versa. But yeah, so I'm still doing that, and I'm almost done. So kind of been chopping through that throughout my time training and
Is this like
wrestling.
the
So
last half a year? Is that what's kind of like finishing up here in 2022?
yeah, COVID really screwed a lot of that up, and kind of made it virtual learning for me. It was always, I don't have a problem with it, but it's not as ideal as being in person.
Right.
So yeah, it made it a little difficult. So trying to kind of balance that and school and wrestling and working all at the same time. So, but I am towards like the last half of, like, I'm basically done. So we'll get that out of the way so that I can start focusing more on this.
So is that the goal then? Is wanting to continue in wrestling? Like, would you rather that, like, if you had your ideal career path? Not to say that I can really tell you where a arts and economics degree versus a wrestler goes, like in terms of career path, but like, what do you feel is more appealing? Would you like to continue to be a wrestler if you could make a living out of that, or would you like to do that kind of like a side thing, and then obviously, you know, go with your education and continue along that path as a career path?
So I think if you ask like the 6-year-old me or 7-year-old me, I would probably say like, screw that, I just want to be a wrestler. And that's still the same way I feel right now. Like, if the opportunity ever did come where I can do this full time, and it'd be kind of sustainable, then absolutely, like, I would love to do it. But at the same time, like, I didn't go into school for something that I didn't enjoy. So I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy kind of the academic side of me, and that's a part of me that, like, not a lot of people know that I really actually do enjoy and like doing. So it wouldn't be like I guess, a depressing life change if I decided just to go through and with my academics. But at the same time, like, I feel like a healthy balance is always good. And I always told myself, and it was a promise kind of I made to my family once I first started, was like, hey, like, I'm gonna get my education because I feel it's important, and I'm gonna get that and finish that, because you never know what happens in this business. I've had some near-death experiences doing this as well. So it makes me kind of grateful that I have a backup plan just in case if shit hits the fan, as they say. But I definitely wouldn't mind as well, just kind of doing it both at the same time. But like, wrestling is obviously like the ultimate dream. So
If you were if you were to think about it, would you be like, hey, I would love to go traveling, or I would like doing this on the weekends, kind of full time? Like, what a part of that, like, because I know going to like an AEW or a WWE means you're on the road all the time, you're away from family and stuff. It's really hard to try to maintain any other kind of normal job, for instance. Does that seem like it's too much for you? Like, that would be too far, or would that be like, no, I still want to try that for a few years, kind of thing?
no, like, if the opportunity did come
Yeah,
up, I would absolutely take it.
yeah,
It's those are like one of the lifetime opportunities, and even if it's like, even if I can find it like a sustainable, like even just wrestling on the indies, but doing it more full time and being able to like travel more, and then I wouldn't have an issue not working, a regular job and just doing the wrestling. So like, if those opportunities came up, absolutely I would take them, because those are few and far between. But I guess I would say, like, I'm content if I don't, if it doesn't go anywhere past me just like wrestling on the indies, like, in Canada or Western Canada. The fact that I'm still wrestling and I'm still performing at and doing something that I love doing, it still makes me happy. So yeah.
well, this actually brings me a pretty fun question. So, talking about somebody who did it full time, you did recently have a match for wrestling with RCW against one Johnny Curtis, aka Fandango. So you got to tell us about that experience, man, because whenever you get somebody who has had one of those matches with like a former big name, like this guy beat Jericho at Mania, kind of big. Like, that's a big thing to say. And you got in the ring with him. What was that experience like? How did you learn out that, like, you were gonna have that match with Fandango? How did that come about?
It was out of the blue. I was just told out of the blue. And I was told, hey, like, I knew Fandango was coming in initially, and I was like, oh, like, it'd just be cool to be in the locker room with him and just to be able to say hi and just kind of watch his match. And I didn't think in a million years I was gonna have that match. It wasn't
Right.
even in my mental. And I remember I was out somewhere, and then I got a message or a phone call from the promoter. I was like, hey, like, we're gonna give you Fandango. And it was just like, I was shocked. Like, I didn't process it for like a couple days. I was like, what? Like, why me? And what did I do to deserve it and stuff? But to be fair, there were some people there who really pushed for me, and people who really believed in me and wanted me to do it, and were able to talk to the promoter and let me do it. So those people know who they are, and I'm very grateful for them. But it was surreal. So
That's gotta be. So, did you feel like you learned? Like, what was that like, though? Like, how did you put your match together with him? Was it like, let him call it and kind of work with him, or were you guys like there before the match? Like, just like, were you running through it like 10 times? Like, how did it go?
But to be honest, like, so it was actually scheduled to be a singles match, and it didn't end up actually being that way.
No, okay.
It did turn into a tag team match.
Yeah, okay.
Um, so there were some circumstances that were just beyond our control. But
Happens.
we ended up having a tag team match. So I did actually end up tagging with Rich King, and we wrestled Fandango and Mars the Specialist in a match. And just putting together that match was like, honestly, it felt like putting together a match with somebody that like I already knew in the locker room. Like it wasn't like a lopsided thing. It wasn't like him just, oh, you guys do this, do that. It was literally like a genuine team effort. And he was like sitting there listening, like we were pitching ideas to him and he was like throwing ideas back and processing. And like, we were just having fun with it. And like, it was so cool just being able to like, just sit there and talk to him like he's one of the boys. And whenever you have those experiences and you hear a lot about times some guys coming down to the indies and they're not necessarily the best, or they're not necessarily, wanting to be there or whatever. But he was like, at least in my experience, he was the polar opposite of that. And we were able to really put together a match and have fun. And it was one of those matches that wasn't so wrestling heavy. It was more based on character and more based on, kind of getting the Fandango character to go against us. And I think it lined up to be one of like my favorite matches ever. And the ones that I learned the most from. So
That's all, and that actually brings me to my next question, which was going to be like, outside of something like this, what would you say some of your favorite matches are? Like, what would be some of the reasons behind them? Like, did you have a match where you just felt like you just had a technical masterpiece, or did you have a match where it was just like the storytelling was just so good, or you guys just had a blast? Like, what are some of your favorite matches that you've done?
okay, so I'd say put that Fandango one up there,
For sure.
at the top, because that was a pretty surreal experience. I had a match with Rich King in Monster Pro just before I left, and we were kind of feuding for the Provincial Championship that I was holding at the time. And that was one of those matches too where it was just like it gelled, and it was so good. And it was just the reaction of the crowd and us playing off each other, and the reaction at the end of the match it was just so perfectly done that it's something that's super up there for me. And I had a couple of those matches in Monster Pro as well with some of the guys I mentioned earlier, with the Rich King, with the Mitch Clarks and the Lumberjack Larrys. And I think as well, once I moved over to kind of RCW and started doing that full time, had some matches with MRB. Had one in Calgary with him that was a really good match, and I enjoyed it, and I thought I did quite well in that. I had a couple matches with Heavy Metal as well too that I thought went quite well. So there's so many matches that I'm proud of, but those are kind of the guys that I would name in my single stuff. But I also did some stuff when I was a tag wrestler too, primarily, like I said, with the Dad Bod Squad, or wrestling other teams in Monster Pro. I had a lot of fun with. So
Do you have any like dream matchups that you haven't had a chance to have around Alberta yet, or like be it in singles or in tags that you just be like, oh, I would still love to get in the ring with X or Y from around Alberta?
I don't think there's anybody in particular, because I'm just so bad at being put on the spot like that. Like, I'm
that's what
forget
I do.
somebody.
That's what I do. That's what I
know
do.
you do that on purpose. You do that on purpose because you want me to forget somebody. I know what you're doing.
But we do it with love, though, because we still like to give shine to people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But there's like a lot of people like that I haven't been in the ring with, especially like down like in Lethbridge. There's some guys that I haven't wrestled yet. I'm down for in Pure Power Wrestling. Some guys in Saskatchewan as well for like Prairie Pro as well that I haven't been in the ring with. So I honestly I couldn't give you off the top of my head. But I'm open for everything, and I feel like I've had some pretty good matches that I can that I'd say I've had so far. So definitely like to add to those.
And you just listed two great promotions that just have top-notch talent. Like, for instance, we don't get as much of the Sask boys out here as we would still like, but I know we all love them still. And even down in Lethbridge, there's so much like untapped talent that just kind of feels like they're kind of stuck in the little Lethbridge area that we'd love to see them expand more out. People like Sidney Steele, for instance, got out of Lethbridge and has done really well for himself. But you know what I mean? But it's like one of those names where it's just like it's few and far between who gets back and forth too much. But I'm glad that there are them who still happen, but there's still more that need to come down from Lethbridge, in my opinion.
And there's always like I always notice that there's always people coming up that are new too as well, that are just doing so well. And Alberta is just in general, Western Canada is just like such a mecca for wrestling. I actually had the opportunity to go down to Prairie Pro Wrestling one time and do a show there, and just that environment was crazy. So I definitely love to go back there and just kind of expand the horizon and do some more shows across Western Canada. So
what's the furthest? Is that the furthest you've been out then? Is Saskatchewan, or have you done shows in BC or anywhere in like northern states or anything?
Yeah, so I think Saskatchewan's probably like the furthest I've been out. I don't know if it was Saskatoon. I know we did a show in like Tisdale for BW.
Right.
I don't even know relative to Saskatchewan or Saskatoon where that was. But yeah, I think like Saskatchewan's probably the farthest I've been. So
That's pretty cool. What about like in terms of actual types of matches? Have you like do you find that there's a type of match that you're most drawn towards, or that you still want to do, or like are you a big fan of like the big battle royals? Do you like singles or tag most? Like, what is your favorite type of match then?
It's kind of changed. I was a huge like just a singles wrestler fan. I was always a fan of like the longer matches, whether it was like those 25-minute, 30-minute matches, 45-minute matches. Like, I always found that those were super interesting. But once I got into and doing tag wrestling myself, I really fell in love with tag wrestling too, and enjoy kind of like, especially around the time where like the New Day and Usos were having like their like kind of tag team,
crazy matches that they've had. Holy.
Matches. Yeah, so those matches, like, I really drew me into tag wrestling, and I really started to really enjoy that. But yeah, like I don't have any like specific, like I dabbled in hardcore. Me and Danny Evans did a hardcore match like in October, and I'm not the most hardcore guy, but that I was pretty proud of myself for the things that I did and took there. So I'm just trying to expand and do some stuff that are a little outside of my comfort zone. So
you're gonna do a tack bump, right? Like that's the next you're gonna do. You're like, I don't know about that one. I don't think so.
I can't. Those tiny sharp objects, they absolutely scare the shit out of me.
I don't know. I completely understand. The same thing with spiders. I don't know why, but those tiny little spiders are like way worse than like the big ones. You see, like I don't know what it is.
You could control one big spider. Like if one big spider runs, okay, you know where it is.
Right.
Like tiny ones, they'll go around you and you won't know where they are, and they'll like sneak up behind you. It's a no.
Or you'll just find them on you, and instead because you can't feel them, they're so small. Big ones, you get like that, and that scares you. But it's worse when you find them on you and you didn't have any idea. Sorry, gross.
No, but at least we bonded because we know we both hate tiny spiders.
Oh, or spiders in general.
Yeah,
like that.
Screw those.
What in terms of your hardcore match though? Like, what were some of the things that you did? Like, what were some of the spots that you were like, I'm proud I took that spot. Like that was hardcore.
I think probably the most hardcore one is I took a bump off of a stage through 2 tables. One of them didn't break, which usually happens in indie wrestling. Something just doesn't break. Yeah, that was like the bump of the night, and definitely was nervous thinking about taking that one. And Danny's a hardcore guy anyway, so it didn't faze him. It's just another day in the office for him. But for me, I was like, where should we put it technically? Where should we do this? Where should we do that? I'm just like so nervous. But yeah, I think it is mostly that. Like I don't really mind taking the weapons and stuff. Like it's not a big deal. But I think that table bump was something that definitely had me up the night before.
I can whenever I hear that like the table didn't break, I can only imagine just all that impact. It must go through
one
you.
Of them broke.
One of them at least.
So one of them did break. Yeah.
At least there was some. Oh well, that's good. At least it's the one you went through.
The one Danny went through did. So.
Oh, poor Danny. But that's awesome. All right, well, we're probably going to start moving in towards the question and answer part of this. This has been fantastic so far. If Sho could start sending those over to me, that'd be great. I'm going to just drink some water quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, but this has been super awesome. This was such an easy conversation. We could do this again, like, easily.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's take a look and see what some of these questions that are be coming through are.
Cool.
I actually got one up here. Oh, here they go. From Chris Parrish. Ask him how wet he prefers his toilet paper when wiping. Oh, Parrish. We love Parrish.
So much.
We love Parrish.
We love Parrish. So I'm not going to give the entire story because it's going to take forever. Maybe I'll tell you off camera about it.
All right.
But we just had a giant locker room debate over toilet paper and the methods of wiping. And it literally got the entire locker room into it. And it was a really heated discussion. It started with me in heavy metal and training, and it just started snowballing, and then they got more people into it. So all I'm going to say is screw you, Parrish. I love you, but screw you.
So are you saying pro or anti-moisture? At least I'll make you. Which side are we taking here?
I'm a pro moisture.
Pro moisture. Hey, that's fair.
Yeah. And I think that's what got a lot of flack or a lot of issue from the boys. They didn't understand it. I come from a huge bidet. I'm a huge bidet person. So
hey, why not? It's super hygienic comparatively, right?
Exactly. And I need to be washed. So if I don't have a bidet in the situation, I'm going to simulate it somehow.
I heard an interesting thing, and this is completely just the weirdest thing. But they're like, if anything in the world shits on you, on any part of your body, you're going to the sink and you're wiping it off with soap and you're scrubbing it. But why is it that when you go and take a shit, you're just content with wiping it with paper and walking away, right? Like that's the argument I've heard, right? So
there's still shit on you. Like there's still shit. Like there's still shit on you when you wipe it dry. That's what I'm trying to explain to them. But I guess like 98% of the locker room doesn't understand that.
They're the type of people who just wipe the shit off of them when it hits their chest with paper, I suppose, and that's good enough. There you go.
I've tried to give them that same analogy, and they just don't want to take it. So I've pled the fifth at that point.
Hey, we got it on. This is now live. We have this on the internet. We've got two people in agreement right now. How's that?
Exactly. There you go. Thank you.
All right. Next question here from Mike the Ref. There was a video on Twitter recently of you being dragged away by Rich King. I did actually see this. Did he actually drag you back to the Av as rumors have stated?
No, he did not. He was going to. Me and Rich King, honestly, have been having so much fun, like what we're doing recently. Ever since we started tagging, doing that Fandango stuff, it's just kind of snowballed into like us teaming together. And we put out videos, or Rich puts out videos every week on his Instagram and Twitter, and they're just absolute comedy gold. And just being able to kind of play off each other and going from rivals to teammates that don't want to be teammates. I don't want to spoil everything. But that's an ongoing joke that we say. He's going to drag me back to the Av. So one day he will.
Oh, perfect. All right, here, a question from Shout. While venturing into the past of wrestling, have you reached mid-90s All Japan women's wrestling yet?
No, I have not. No.
I know he's going to be like, you should look up Manami Toyota matches, which is what I'm sure he's going to say, because she has had like more 5-star matches, I think, than like any person in existence. So she's amazing.
Absolutely. I'll definitely check her out.
Oh, we got another Chris Parrish question here. All right. Being someone of color, have you perceived wrestling's representation of people of color when you started watching until now, whether as a fan or as a worker or maybe both?
That's a good question. Speaking of Parrish, him and I had a really good conversation. I think it was summer of 2020. We had a conversation on Instagram Live, just kind of surrounding the whole like controversy that was happening, whether it was Black Lives Matter or other racial issues. So him and I had a good discussion about that, and we were able to kind of talk about a lot of things and kind of come to understanding. To answer the question like in the shortest way possible, because that's definitely a question that could take like an hour to answer. There definitely is. I mean, it's inevitable. There's going to be issues, whether it's like racially or religiously or culturally, that people who are in my situation face, and it's something that we just learn to live with. But nowadays, we're able to actually come out and talk about it and be open and honest and be like, hey, like that's not cool, and it's much more accepted now and it's much more understood, which is great. And kind of in my time in Alberta, like I've had some experiences with some people who kind of are on the other side, but like the majority of people have been overwhelmingly like supportive, and Parrish is one of them, and a lot of the people I wrestle with, whether it was in Monster Pro or whether it was in RCW, have really been supportive with that stuff. So it's cool to have like a support system who are kind of there to help you out and listen when you need to speak and get some advice from. And so yeah, I mean, there is obviously issues, but we're kind of chomping at it slowly, and it's something that's gonna need a lot of time and a lot of work. So
I completely understand. Yeah, not one of those ones that it's just kind of easy to answer in like 2 sentences kind of a thing. Yeah. But it has been nice to see that there's been a lot more open discussion lately. That has been very needed for so long.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's the first step, right? Conversation is the first step. And once you can actually understand each other and listen to each other's sides, that's when you can really come to a conclusion. So
actually, we have a follow-up here from Mike the Ref to follow up to Parrish's question. Have you seen a difference since the start of the Black Lives Matter movement in people's attitudes towards people of color in wrestling world, whether you personally or overall?
Yes. There's definitely been a change. Now, whether that change is genuine or it's just a reaction to the times, I don't know. But I've definitely started to notice that there's more, I guess, hesitancy for people to kind of go the ignorance route nowadays. Now, like I said, whether that's just them being afraid of being, exposed or being called out, or whether, it's just them actually genuinely changing. I don't know, but I've definitely started to notice, at least in my personal life, that there's people who I thought, who were kind of on the other side of things have come up and spoken to me, and we've had some conversations and we've come to understanding. So it's something that kind of took the world by storm, and not a lot of people accepted it, and a lot of people want to accept it. But it's definitely started a conversation, as we've been saying, and it started putting it in the limelight as it should be.
Awesome. I love that you're here and able to speak about that for me, because I'm not really able to speak about that kind of stuff. So
Always happy to. Always happy to.
Question here from Wrestling Rodeo. Ooh, here's a good one. Who is your favorite rival to wrestle in the independents?
Ooh. Favorite rival. I'm trying to think.
I feel you've got that love-hate thing going with Rich King right now, so...
Yeah, like we had that kind of love-hate. We were rivals in Monster Pro, and then we became kind of, I guess, having to deal with each other here in RCW. Make KB6 as well. I had a huge kind of rivalry with him. Him and I actually were a tag for a while. And after I finished tag with Big Ben, and we were able to have like a kind of a tag team, I guess, like teaming with each other, and then turning on each other, and then having him play the heel role, and then me play the face role. Kind of reversed that when I came to RCW, and I was able to play the heel, and he was able to play the face. So that was also fun as well. But we had a long rivalry as well, like I said, with the Dad Bods. Me and Big Ben, we were just having matches with them every single month for like a year. We were just like wrestling each other, and we were kind of like under the radar, and nobody really paid attention to our matches, so we were able to like get away with stuff and do things that we might have been told no. So yeah, so I'd say the ones I mentioned, but I don't think I've ever had like a really long. I had a rivalry with Danny Evans as well, I think, leading up to our tag match, or our hardcore match. Sorry, was pretty good. So yeah, I would say those guys.
Awesome. All right, next question here, also from Wrestling Radio. As someone who grew up in the 2000s, if you had to come up with a 90s themed gimmick for yourself, what would it be?
Oh God.
You gotta reach to the older generation. You gotta reach back.
You gotta reach to the older generation.
You gotta think too when you were 5. Like, what was popular when you were like 5? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But not for your generation, for like the past generation.
And 90s theme. So like 90s wrestlers were always like much more like character driven. Everything was more like, based on that. And I'd say so a gimmick for myself is in like my as T.Y. Jackson.
I would just say, like, if you were to just come up with like a 90s gimmick. So I mean, you could be a Power Ranger if you wanted to. I'd say, like, what would you be your 90s? I think that's what he's asking.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe I would be like, I think maybe like something with like, I don't know, maybe like a more flamboyant character, something that like somebody like, has longer hair like I do, maybe like have some like colored, gear or something, and just be like super, like something like Macho Man, something like loud and different. Maybe that'd be like thing I would come up to.
Something full of charisma, like just bleeding charisma on every angle.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, I like that. Yeah. Okay, here's a question from Mike the Ref. In the Ripper Royals, how many times did Parrish hit you with a dildo?
None. I was able to avoid the dildo.
You completely avoided the dildo.
Now, trust me, there's times where I saw that dildo coming real close. You know what? It's time for me to get the fuck out of here. Excuse my French. But yeah, no, I've avoided the dildo, thankfully. I've been hit with other things though, like I've been hit with a microwave. The last Ripple I was in, I think it was a cantaloupe or a pineapple. Something was thrown at me.
Something citric.
Yeah. The first Rip Royal I did, I got suffocated with a bag. It was the funniest thing. It was Steve Rivers.
Sounds hilarious.
And I was just in the corner, and he grabbed this paper bag, and he just comes up to me. He's like, "Hold your breath," and I'm like, "What?" And then I just see the plastic bag go on my face, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is where I die." So, I've had my fair share of interesting Rip Royal things, but not the dildo, and I will never be hit with that dildo.
Oh man. I just think back to Clandestine, and it was Ben Omen getting that in the mouth during the dildo on a pole match. Ugh.
God bless Ben.
Ben, right?
He's been through a lot. He's been through a lot. Even recently, too, I tend to give Ben a lot of crap. He did end up firing back on me a couple weeks ago, so it's always fun.
We love Ben. We all love Ben.
Yeah,
That's Ben. The thing I love about wrestling is just that, I'm not a wrestler, so I can't claim this kind of stuff. But you guys rib on each other constantly. It's so fun to watch. I'm kind of like just stuck on the outside looking in. I just go, that's what I get to do, so that's always happy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Here's a question from Chuck. You said nice things about PJ Say and Jules. Now bury them.
Oh, bury them. Okay. There's like, how much time do you have?
Oh, I mean, we got whatever you need. You bury
Okay.
cut your promo.
No, no, I have nothing but nice things to say about those guys. They're cool stuff. Yeah, I'm trying to be nice and humble, but I probably will say something brutal to them when I see them to their face. So
If
that's
anybody
usually how
can
it
go
goes.
back in time and they can listen to the old Dad Bod Squad pod that you were obviously a part of, but I'm sure there's plenty of you burying each other on there if you
Oh
looked hard.
yeah. I think yeah. You probably go back, and I think PJC probably has a link for those. You can go back and see how absolutely brutal we were to each other. So
Oh,
fun
awesome.
times.
All right, next question here from Mike the Ref. Talk about the influence of Cato as a teacher at MPW.
That's a great question. So anytime people ask me kind of who is your main trainer, and I've had like a lot of people have trained me, and to this day, I have trainers that are training me and stuff. But Cato was kind of really the first guy that really took me under his wing, and he would really spend a lot of time with me to kind of go through things, teach me things. And 90% of the time I was in the ring when I was in Monster Pro training, to be completely honest, it was run by Cato. And he would take the time to watch my matches. He would take the time to give me feedback. So I have nothing but great things to say about Cato. And like I remember telling him this when I first came to RCW, because he was there, and I remember telling him like, I consider you my trainer. When somebody asked me who's the guy who trained you, I say it's Cato. He was the first guy to really help me. So I have nothing but great things to say about Cato. And Cato is an interesting character as well too. He's I feel like a lot of things that I'm starting to do now as a heel I picked up from Cato, just like the shitty heel antics and just being completely obnoxious and trying to get a reaction is this all Cato stuff. So
That's awesome. I've only ever heard the nicest things about Cato. I've got to interact with him like I think only once or twice,
he's the
but
best.
so nice.
Yeah.
Next question here from Shout. What is your recovery routine after taking a beating in physical matches? Okay, what's your recovery? I guess is what he's trying to ask. Like, what do you do to recover?
So usually it starts with me coming to the back and screaming because I'm in pain. No, I'm kidding.
You're like, ah!
Yeah. I guess I think the most important thing for me, like at least that I've done, is rest. I like to rest a lot, especially after big matches and stuff. There's like the typical like the foam rollers and the stretching, and it really helps. Stretching before and after your matches, and it's something that I've tested, and it works. So stretching is a lifetime. And I know Rob Van Dam used to say that like stretching was like kind of his lifeline when he was wrestling, and it's definitely there. But like just like foam rolling. I haven't got into like the massages and like the chiropractor stuff yet. I know I was talking to a couple people in the locker room last week about it, and some of them recommended it. So I might try that. But I think I'm just maybe still so like I guess young in my career that I'm like, I'm fine. I don't need to like worry about myself. And then some days I wake up and I'm like, I feel way older than I should. So
all I can say as a person in my 30s is, you fool! Like it comes around.
Yeah, it does. I should probably get on that ASAP.
Here's a question from Jules. Would you rather fight 5 Hornswoggle-sized Big Shows or 1 Big Show-sized Hornswoggle?
5 Hornswoggle-sized Big Shows.
Okay.
Or no.
Oh, okay. Yes, that is correct. Yes, 5 Hornswoggle-sized Big Shows, or I guess because they're not WWE. 5 Paul White-sized Swoggles versus 1 Swoggle-sized Big Show. Or wait, how was that? I got the mess up now. One Big Show-sized Hornswoggle or 5 Hornswoggle-sized Big Shows. That's how it is.
What a question.
Right? Leave it to Jules.
I was actually having a similar conversation with some of my friends the other day about it, and it's not on the same kind of wavelength, but we were talking about like how many, this is going to sound pretty funny, but how many kids we could fight at one time. Like it would be like 5, 10, 15, and I know some people have some higher levels, but like I feel like 5 people coming at you at once is always it's always going to be a struggle,
right?
So maybe
they can coordinate if they talk, you know what I mean? It's just like, hey, get his arm, like, you know what I mean?
If they talk, I'm fucked.
But if they can't talk, then you can just throw some roundhouse kicks around and you're pretty good.
Yeah, maybe I'll go for the 1 Big Show size Swoggle. I guess because there's only 1 of them, and it comes back to that issue we were talking about. It's the little things, like the little spiders versus the 1 big spider. Like I just want the 1 big one because I can see it and I can deal with it. So
you can run away from his awesome, which if at the size of being Paul White, his beard must be like down, like way down there. You just hide in his giant beard that would be the Swoggle beard. and you'll be
So
totally
I'll use that to
fine.
my advantage. Yeah.
Here's a question from Mr. Crowder himself. No question, but I just wanted to really put over the promos that Rich and TY are doing right now. That's a nice little not a question, but
Oh,
there you
thank
go.
you. Yeah,
Fantastic.
thank you.
Uh,
They're very fun stuff.
Perfect. All right, here's another question from Mr. Parrish. What did winning the MPW Provincial title mean to you? I ask because it was your first singles championship, and it was much overdue, yet very deserving, and it is still a first title win.
Yeah, yeah. Parrish was actually part of that match too, which made it a lot really special. It was me versus Chris Parrish versus Lumberjack Larry, and we had this triple threat match that was once again probably one of the best matches I ever had, and it was so fun being in there. It was my first time being in the ring with Parrish in, like, I guess not in a tag situation, or maybe not even at all. So it was just a great experience to kind of have it. And I mean, your first title reign is always, something you're going to remember. And whether it was overdue or not, I guess that's not for me to say. But I definitely appreciate Parrish and Larry really putting in the most time and effort to really put me over that match. They did a lot in that match to really make me look good and to make the title reign, or I guess the title win, legend. So like I'm very grateful to those guys. But it was surreal. And it's, like I said, holding a championship is always something that's cool. And I was able to hold on to it for a while. Now, condition, it was COVID, so like I probably defended that belt like 5 times and I held it for like a year.
Which means you held it for a year. Well, that's what we all learned. There you go. We've learned this. That's how that counts.
My cage match says otherwise, but it was a year. But it was a great match and nothing but great things.
I could always say great things about Chris Parrish. Like I always like to say, actually, when I first got my first job, like not my first job, but when I first did my first gig in wrestling podcast, and I went up to Clandestine for that first weekend, I met up with Chris the night before, and he bought me a beer. Nicest guy. I really love Parrish. He's just he's such a sweetheart. Yeah. Don't tell him that in the ring, though, because in the ring you would hate to hear that. But outside the ring, he's a sweetheart.
Yeah, no, like I remember when I first started too, Parrish and Maniac as well at the time, who's retired now, were 2 guys that really like were cool with me and really like helped me ease the nerves of being there, because they've been doing it for a long time. They know when a rookie's nervous and when they don't know what they're doing, or so like they took a lot of time to help me and talk to me. And to this day, like Parrish is somebody that I always come to after my matches and I talk to, and he gives me advice and is a mentor to me. So yeah, shout out Parrish.
Shout out to Parrish. All right, here's another question from Mike the Ref, and then we'll go into my last question. Mike the Ref asks, who is your favorite general manager and how many ways can you put him over?
My favorite general manager. So it's Mike the Ref. I always used to call, for some context, when Mike Ref was the general manager for Monster Pro, I would always, just run up to him and be like, "You're my favorite general manager." There's no context, and it just stuck. So you are still my favorite GM, Mike. And yeah.
Better, so you like him more than the anonymous Raw general manager, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, I really hated the anonymous Raw.
I mean, who didn't?
It was the worst. I hated it. So yes, Mike, you are better than the Raw GM.
Awesome. Now, final question of the night, and this one is a personal question because I want to know, because I always like to bury Blake Cannon as often as I can. Which side of the debate do you take, pro or anti ketchup chip?
Where would indifferent be?
I mean, I would say that would land in indifferent. I would say like you don't care, but you don't not care. You'd eat it if it was there, but you don't go out and seek it, kind of a thing.
There we go. Yeah, but like at the same time, like I think I lean more towards pro than hate.
Right.
Like it's just, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, it's it doesn't taste like ketchup.
No, not at all. It's a much better flavor than ketchup, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess I lean more toward pro, but I guess I'm quite indifferent. Like you said, if it's in front of me, I'll eat it. But it's not necessarily the first bag I'm gonna grab when going to the store. So.
But we can both agree, though, that Blake Cannon has trash taste buds. Then.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. All
absolutely.
Right. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew that we would all be in agreement there. I don't think any guest would come on here and say nice things about Blake, anyways. So.
Oh,
no, of course not. He's not here right now, so we can bury him.
You know what? I'll actually tell you a little secret. Actually, the reason why I left Monster Pro was because of Blake Cannon.
I don't blame you. Like him going around there with his championship, going, oh, what a smug asshole that guy must be.
You know, I held that provincial championship, and there wasn't a second second where Blake wasn't staring at it, whether he wanted to steal it or whether he was like going through my bag and taking it. Like, he made my life there an absolute living hell. So Blake.
You know, good thing you left, man. Like, and that's that's probably why the DBS pod stopped as well. You guys just can't deal with him. It's just hard. I understand. That must have been like exhausting.
Oh yeah, when we were doing that podcast, there was definitely a secret group chat that Blake was not into. Just saying.
Awesome, dude. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. This has been really awesome. We went like an hour, so this has been perfect, dude. Before we do let you go, though, like, give some plugs. Talk about your stuff. Like, what are you doing? Talk about where you're going to be, where people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Twitter, you can find me at TY Jackson, and there's underscores after the T and Y. And then on Instagram, you can find me at t.y.jackson. And that's where I kind of post everything that I'm doing. At the moment, I'm just working through RCW and doing that stuff weekly. So every Saturday or Sunday, you'll find me on a show there, whether it's in Calgary or Edmonton. And yeah, all the things that I post is on there, and I kind of link to the promos that me and Rich King do, because they are pretty entertaining, and you can kind of see those on there as well too. But yeah, those are kind of like the two social medias that I use the most. But thanks for having me as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. So
no, this has been fantastic, dude. Thank you so much. And a big thank you to everybody who asked questions here today. We had a plethora of people here asking questions, and that was really nice. I always love when you get that like intimate feel and everybody gets to come in and join and ask questions. So that's always really, really nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect, Dan. Dude, thank you again. Have yourself a wonderful night, and I will send you a message here in like 2 minutes anyways when I log off. All right, talk to you later, buddy. A big thank you once again to T.Y. Jackson for sitting down with me today to share his story, and we can bring it out to all of you here on the Canadian Wrestling Archive. It was such a fun little chat, and I hope you guys all enjoyed it as much as I did. I hope you guys enjoyed the QA section as much as I did. Like I said, one of the most fun ones that we've had, and it was really great to learn about his wrestling story, how he got into wrestling, and all of his cool matches and everything he would love to do. It was such a fun time. Can't wait to sit down and chat with T.Y. once again. But anyways, that does it for us here today. Remember, once again, if you liked what you heard, to hit that like button and subscribe and turn on the notification bell. And yeah, as you can tell, my headset broke from last week, so this is a much cheaper, not as good headset that I'm using, but at the very least it has some nice blue, so there's that. Anyways, that does it for me here today. I hope you have yourself a wonderful day. We'll be back next Tuesday, and a big thank you once again to all of our sponsors here: RK Athletics, Backbreaker Media, Wrestling Rodeo, the Canadian Wrestling Archive, of course, where you guys are enjoying this here today. So yeah, remember, have yourself a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon.